Our Bible word is John 13, verses 34 to 35. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So yeah, we have Jesus. It's in the context of the foot washing episode where Jesus washes all his disciples' feet. The Gospel of John describes it's an evening meal. Now, whether this is exactly the same meal where Jesus had the Last Supper, that's an interesting question. Or is it a different meal? That's an issue that some say yes, it does refer to the same meal. Some scholars say no, it's a different meal. Anyway, we don't know. But yeah, Jesus is washing his disciples' feet. And our pericope is the chapter 13:8 from verse 1 to 38. It's the ultimate model for love and service. So this is about Jesus, his examples. And there are a few themes that's addressed here in this chapter. Number one, it's that Jesus' death dominates, his impending death. And specifically, his death as the suffering servant. We can read about the suffering servant there in Isaiah 52, verses 13, and the whole of chapter 53. And just before our pericope, if you go to chapter 12, verses 38, the evangelist actually quotes from Isaiah. He says there, Lord, who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? So yeah, there's this connection between Jesus as a suffering servant and the suffering servant that's spoken of in Isaiah. The suffering servant who will give his life as a sacrifice of atonement for others, etc. So that's theme number one that's addressed here. But also related to this is that the death of Jesus, his passion, is an example of loving service. Because quite frequently, attention is drawn to the example of Jesus and what he's doing, his passion. It's a loving service that he offers to his followers. So that's number two. The passion of Jesus is an example of loving service to others. Also, what's present here, ironically, is amidst the love of Jesus and his self-sacrifice for his followers, the example he gives, there's also the element of betrayal. So there are these foreshadowings of his betrayal that's also mentioned in the same chapter. Another theme that's also comes through here is that the departure of Jesus will happen soon by way of the cross. In other words, Jesus is not going to remain with them. He's going to return. He's going to go back to his Father where he came from. And this departure of Jesus by way of the cross, it also prepares the way for the farewell discourse. And this farewell discourse starts in verse 31 and it goes all the way up to the high priestly prayer that ends there with the last verse of chapter 17. So these are important themes that come through. The passion of Jesus, which also serves as an example of love and service for others. There's also his betrayal that's coming up, and also that his departure is coming soon by way of the cross. That's the way he will return to the Father. And of course, this prepares the way for the farewell discourse. So our Bible word actually comes from that part where the farewell discourse has already started. The farewell discourse starts in verse 31, where Jesus speaks again about his passion that will happen. And now our immediate pericope is verses 34 to 35. It's about following Jesus' example. It's one of the big themes that's part of this chapter 13. And of course, the gospel was written for a community that was diverse. It consisted of Jews, Samaritans, and Gentiles. So there was this diversity. But the whole idea is now that this diversity must come together in unity. And the one way they show that unity is through love for one another. And specifically, it's the example of Jesus' love, his passion. He's laying down his life, his sacrifice, which is the ultimate example for this loving service for others. And this loving unity is the essential characteristic of the followers of Jesus, because it reveals the character of Jesus. And interestingly, this is the only duty that's spelled out as a commandment. You must do this. And it happens here in verses 34, but also if you go read chapter 15, verse 12, a similar commandment is given, that love one another. Of course, love commandment is central to the law. We find that already in the law of Moses. For example, in Leviticus 19, verses 18, Jesus also quotes it in the other Gospels. But yeah, what's new, the way that's presented in the Gospel of John, it's a standard for this love. Because we must love your neighbor. All right, doing good, etc. But what Jesus now brings here is the standard up to which we must measure this love. If we read our Bible word again, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So this love is to emulate the nature of Jesus. And of course, the nature of Jesus is the nature of the Father. It's the nature of God. This service, this loving service that will characterize the followers of Jesus. This is how people will be identified as followers of Jesus, that they have this love, just like Jesus loved us, to have the similar love towards one another. Because this love will be a witness to the world. This is how the world will recognize, yes, here are the true followers of Jesus. So what is important here is the love commandment is there. It's part of Leviticus. In the other Gospels, Jesus also speaks of this. Love God, love your neighbor. But in John's Gospel, there's a new commandment that Jesus gives. It builds on that, where a standard is given for this love. And the standard is the way Jesus himself loved his followers.